Welcome to The Explainer. I'm so thrilled you're here today because we're looking at a story that's not just incredibly heartwarming, but honestly, it's packed with highly actionable insights. If you've ever felt totally overwhelmed by the idea of teaching a new pet, or frankly, teaching anyone a new skill, you're in exactly the right place. So let's just dive right into it. Today, we're exploring a framework called the 5-Minute Method. And we're going to do this by following the journey of this super energetic golden retriever puppy named Max and his incredibly intuitive owner, Sarah. Through their story, we'll map out exactly how you can build a foundation of absolute trust, and then turn that into lifelong cooperation. So, the big question we absolutely have to start with is this. What actually is the secret to a perfectly behaved dog? I mean, if you've ever had a puppy, you know firsthand, they are essentially just these little bundles of chaotic, biting energy, right? It's so easy to assume the secret must be strict discipline, or maybe long, grueling training sessions, or some really expensive professional obedience school. But as we're going to see with our central case study of Max, the real secret is actually much simpler. It's much gentler and way more effective. And surprise, it doesn't even start with commands at all. Which brings us to phase 1, foundation, earning your dog's trust. Listen, before a single trick can be taught or even one command is uttered out loud, you've got to establish a baseline of safety. Sarah intuitively knew that when Max first arrived at his new home, teaching him tricks was literally at the absolute bottom of the priority list. The very first step was simply proving to him that he was safe. And what's really fascinating about this first step is just how passive it is. The rule: let the dog initiate contact. On Max's very first morning, Sarah didn't try to grab him, she didn't force him onto her lap, she didn't push for any interaction at all. Instead, she just went out into the backyard and sat quietly in the grass. She smiled and just let him explore his new world. Because she wasn't forcing the issue, Max's natural curiosity took over. He slowly wandered over and sniffed her hand. And only then did Sarah gently scratch behind his ears, speaking softly, telling him he was a good boy. This signaled to Max that interacting with her was entirely on his terms. And that right there? That is the absolute bedrock of trust. Over the next few days following that first interaction, Sarah kept proving her kindness through completely everyday activities. It's a brilliant illustration that building a bond isn't about these grand, sweeping gestures. No, it's about a consistent, gentle presence. They spent time sitting quietly together. There was gentle petting paired with soft speech. They played, chasing balls out in the yard. They walked around the garden, just exploring the sights and smells, and they rested together under a tree. Through these super simple, incredibly low-stakes activities, Max learned one fundamental truth. Sarah is kind and Sarah is loving. His tail started wagging happily whenever she was around. The trust was officially locked in. Now that the trust was established, it was time for Max to actually learn his first command. Let's move to phase 2, the mechanics, the lure and reward. Okay, let's break down exactly how Sarah taught Max to sit, because honestly, the mechanics here are just pure genius in their simplicity. First, she brought out some tasty treats, sat down right beside him, and gently said his name, followed by the word sit. Now, obviously, Max had zero idea what that English word meant. He's just a puppy. But rather than getting annoyed or frustrated that he wasn't catching on, Sarah used the lure technique. She held a treat directly above Max's nose. Now think about the basic geometry of a dog's body for a second. If a dog tilts their head upward to follow a treat that's moving up and back over their nose, well, their bottom naturally has to touch the ground just so they can keep their balance. Sarah didn't push his hips down. She didn't physically force him into a sit at all. She just let the upward movement of his head naturally lower his body right to the ground. And the very second, literally the exact moment Max's bottom touched the ground, Sarah sprang into action. This part is absolutely crucial. She smiled brightly and cheerfully said, "Sit." Good boy. She gave him the treat immediately, followed by tons of praise and a good belly rub. Max's tail was just going crazy with excitement because he loved hearing that happy tone of voice. This immediate nature of the reward, pairing the exact physical movement with the treat and the cheerful verbal praise, that's what starts connecting the dots inside the dog's brain. With both the foundation and the mechanics solidly in place, we arrive at phase 3, the routine, consistency over duration. So what do you think was the absolute maximum amount of time Sarah spent on any single training session? 5 minutes. That's it. She and Max practiced that sit command for just 5 minutes before taking a break. Later that afternoon, they gave it another go. When Max tilted his head looking totally confused, she didn't get mad. She just patiently brought out the treat lure again, guided him into the sit, and gave him the reward. By strictly capping the session at 5 minutes, it completely ensures the dog never gets bored, tired, or overwhelmed. It stays what it should be, a fun, positive game. But while those sessions were incredibly short, they were also frequent, 3 times a day to be exact. Short, highly focused sessions sprinkled throughout the day are vastly superior to, say, one grueling, hour-long marathon session. It gives the puppy's brain the time it needs to rest, process what it just learned, and come back totally fresh and excited for the next round. When you map out these short, consistent sessions over a timeline, the progression is kind of staggering. Look at day 1. It was purely about building trust, completely without forced interaction. Fast forward a few days, they hit their first successful sit using that treat lure. By the very next morning, Max was sitting almost immediately the second Sarah gave the command. As they kept this up day after day, Sarah eventually didn't even need to hold the treat above his head. And weeks later, perfect obedience. Visitors would come over to the house, Sarah would simply say, "Max, sit," and without a single moment of hesitation, he'd sit perfectly right beside her. The visitors were absolutely amazed. Which brings us to our final phase, phase 4. The philosophy, the secret to success. Remember when Max was confused on his second attempt? Sarah could have so easily resorted to force, yelling, or punishment. A lot of people do, but she didn't. She stayed completely calm and cheerful. She never once yelled or punished Max for making a mistake. She knew the secret wasn't magic, and it sure wasn't punishment. It was patience, love, and trust. It was an empathetic partnership, simply paired with those 5 minutes of practice 3 times a day. And the incredible result of that empathy is a profound, lifelong bond. There's this beautiful moment where, as the sun was setting one evening, Sarah sat on the porch with Max resting quietly beside her. She looked down at him and whispered, "You're not just my dog, Max. You're family." And Max, clearly knowing he was exactly where he belonged, just wagged his tail, closed his eyes, and rested his head right on her lap. That level of absolute peace and connection, you just don't get that from a dynamic of fear or dominance. It comes purely from that foundation of trust we talked about at the very beginning. Now, we've obviously been talking about a golden retriever puppy today, but take a step back and look at the core principles we've unpacked. Establishing trust before making demands, using gentle guidance instead of forceful pushing, keeping learning sessions short, positive, and super consistent, choosing patience over punishment when confusion inevitably pops up. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. I really hope you can take these insights and apply them to your own life today, because honestly, whether you're teaching a child, mentoring a colleague at work, or even trying to build a new habit for yourself, ask yourself, where else in your life could 5 minutes of patience work magic?